What is up, folks? Jeremy Brand here, another edition of MMA Church. We're back. Last weekend, it was a bit of an MIA kind of weekend. I was sick, under the weather. This weekend, I'm here. I'm not going to be able to go anywhere. The snow is piling up here in Vancouver, BC, but I got my good buddy, Jack Goodwillie, hopping on the show. I'm going to bring him in here right about now. What's going on, Jack? Thank you for joining me today, my friend. You are muted. Cannot hear you. Live streaming as always. Obviously, sometimes technical difficulties happen. I cannot hear you. Not on my end. Nope. See nothing on the interview end. Not sure why. Maybe click back in. But for you viewers that are watching right now, we're going to be talking UFC Vegas 66. Interesting card, some great finishes on it. Interesting main event. We're going to be talking Gordon Ryan, which went down this past Thursday night, and at the UFC Fight Pass Invitational 3, which I covered. I did a little recap over on the MMA Sucka YouTube page. If you haven't checked that out, check that out. I'll link to it in the description below. If you haven't watched that amazing match, sort of back and not even really back and forth. What can I say? It was a stall gate for the entire match until it went to overtime, and then it was interesting. We'll talk that. Hopefully Jack watched some of the World Cup because that was pretty interesting this morning. We'll chat about that as well when he hops on. But before we get to things, make sure you check out Ghost Grappling. They're a friend of ours at MMA Sucka, and they hooked me up with some great gear for my grappling and my jiu-jitsu needs. So check out Ghost Grappling on Instagram. Also check out Sweet Success. They're a donut company here in the Lower Mainland. If you're in British Columbia or Vancouver and in the Lower Mainland, check out Sweet Success. I have a link to them in the description below as well. So check them out. Protein donuts, guilt-free. And make sure you check out Ecamm Live, which is the program that I'm using right now to live stream this show. And make sure you check it out. Here's Jack again. Let's hope we can hear him.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Welcome to the show, Jack. It's been a couple of weeks since we've chat. How things going, man?
Yeah, things are good. Happy holidays, Jeremy. Sorry about that again. I think I had the device muted. There's a mute button on my microphone. I must have just tapped by accident. But,
Fair enough,
we're
fair
here now.
enough.
It's all good.
So I was just letting the viewership here know that we were going to talk UFC Vegas 66. Gordon Ryan, interesting matchup there. And kick things off, did you catch any of the World Cup action this morning?
I did, and a hell of a game it was. I'm not sure how big of a soccer fan you are, but it's definitely something I've gotten into like the last 5-10 years. And World Cup's always a blast.
A
I
lot of
wasn't
people.
thrilled about the matchup.
No,
But the
neither was
game
I. I
was
didn't want to repeat champ either, right? So
yep.
a lot of people and a lot of the world wonder why the world tunes into the World Cup. Well, today's game was definitely proving why the world tunes in. It was probably one of the best soccer matches I've ever watched. Back and forth battle. You can't complain when a player, Mbappe, gets a hat trick. And I mean, the reffing was a little suspect with the penalty call at the end there. But I hate that matches like this go to penalty kicks. A World Cup final should go to a golden goal regardless of how everything plays out. I mean, I understand, they played 30 extra minutes and whatnot, but when it comes down to the finals, and this is like the life's depending on the game, it should never come down to penalty kicks.
I completely agree. It's not as cut and dry as a shootout in hockey. There's not as
No,
much skill to it. There's definitely a lot more luck. Me personally, as a fight fan, I'd rather see a sixth round no time limit, but that's just me.
definitely, of course. All right, UFC Vegas 66, the last UFC event of the year. I think I'm going to need to throw your camera on here. The fight card itself, very interesting matchups. The prelims had some great matches. Not only one stoppage on the prelims, which was the Nurmagomedov match, which back and forth battle. Holy crap! These guys went balls to the walls in the first round. It looked like I always mispronounce his name. Kakramanov had the grappling dominance. He was stuck in a guillotine for a bit of the first round, and then A submission of a guillotine choke for Nurmagomedov in the second round. Back and forth battle between these two, very high level. Did you have a chance to watch that match?
I did. I caught probably 80% of this card, and that was one fight that I did happen to catch because it was honestly one of my most anticipated fights on the show. It was about a pick 'em all week. I think the grappling of Kakramanov sort of caused bettors to go a little bit more that way, and that's what I was thinking too. And typically the guillotine on a takedown like that, it's such a low percentage play, but Saeed, he made it work. The guy has a killer instinct that is going to take him a long way in this division that is just full of killers. And I think this isn't the end for Saeed Yokub either.
No,
That
definitely
guy,
not.
that guy showed to me another gear to his grappling after what he did to Ronnie Lawrence. I mean, that really opened my eyes to what he can potentially do in this division.
If you can grapple
But
like that against a guy from Dagestan, it's pretty impressive.
yeah, yeah, I know Saeed. I know his last name's Nurmagomedov, but he's not even a guy that really hangs his hat on his grappling. His grappling's just okay. It's passable enough. He's really more of a striker. He likes to get a little bit wild. Really reminds more of Zabit than Khabib in
Yes,
that way.
definitely.
But yeah, that was a lot of fun.
The Matthew Simonsberger, Jake Matthews. Did you watch this match? I know you said you only caught about 80% of the card, but holy crap, these guys were swinging and banging. Matthews got dropped 3 rounds in a row and obviously lost the unanimous decision. But holy crap, a back and forth battle in this one, and it showed the tenacity of these two. The chin on Matthews, despite getting dropped, he was able to get back up and still continue to throw bombs.
Well, we've known Jake Matthews is leather tough for
Oh
as long as he's
yeah,
been in the UFC now. The guy's just stupid durable, and that doesn't last forever. But he's still young. Um, Maybe not in terms of MMA years, but I think the guy's only 28, 29. He should just be coming into his prime. And I thought his striking looked good, in spite of the L. It's just the striking defense left a lot to be desired, and you can't have that against a guy who packs the punch that Matt Semmelsberger does. The guy is a brawler in the purest form, and the knockdowns definitely edged the victor. I'd have a problem with that one.
definitely did. Now, moving up to the main card, as we said, the preliminary card only offered one stoppage. Kicking things off on the main card, we went with 4 stoppages in a row. Very impressive matchups. The first one was a round one TKO. The second one, Drew Dober versus Bobby Green. Holy crap. Everyone counted Bobby Green out of this match, I believe. And I mean, Dober is a guy who you can never count out of a match, but Bobby Green looked like a guy who was just standing in there. He looked like he was gonna, you know, be able to pick Drew Dober apart. He did for the very first round. He cut him up, made his nose bleed. A guy with hands at his hips and head movement and footwork as much as Bobby Green has is very hard to hit. Dober said that in the post fight match. But Dober also said that he's a guy, you know what, he doesn't mind getting hit to get inside there, and his corner said to do that in the second round, and that's exactly what he did. This matchup was probably the best fight on the card and the most fun to watch for sure.
Bobby Green's always going to be a tough out in that way, right? I think the only MMA fighter that comes to my mind who uses the Philly shell boxing defense that Floyd Mayweather helped popularize. But usually that would lend itself to a fighter having poor takedown defense because his hands are always going to be up here. But he does well with the wrestling regardless of that. I know Islam dominated him on the ground, but there's not a lot of guys who he wouldn't dominate on the ground, if
Yeah.
we're being honest. Um, I thought the line was a bit off for this one, even though I picked Drew Dober, I believe. It's tough to pick against Drew in a pure striker's delight, especially with his hittable as Bobby Green can be if you can time one on him.
Yeah.
But I thought Bobby acquitted himself really well, and I think he'll continue to do well in spite of the setback. I know we've never seen him knocked out like that, and that's typically the beginning of the end. But the guy looked good. I mean,
He
he
did.
had
He
Drew
looked
hurt in
really
the
good.
first
And you know
round.
what? He landed I think 2 or 3 punches while Drew Dober was coming in to land that left hand that he hit. So, I mean,
Yeah,
against a lot of guys in the division that don't have the power that Dober has, those two, three strikes that he landed would have made them back up and move away rather than come in and continue to push forward, or even just come in and grapple instead of throwing that left hand bomb. So,
Mhm.
needless to say, I don't think it's a real step back for Bobby Green. He's been inside the octagon so many times, and I think that this just proved that he can step in there with anybody, especially if these guys are banging the way they are. What do you think about the call out that Drew Dober made in his post fight speech?
Oh, I didn't see that. Who do you call out?
Um, who the heck is it? Let me look at this. It was let me look.
Okay. Oh, he called out.
Jalen
He called out
Turner.
Jalen Turner.
He
You know
calls
what's
out
funny
Jalen
about that
Turner.
is I didn't see. I was actually watching on my phone. I had the audio muted, and I think I clicked off right
Okay.
before the interview. Um, but I was telling the group chat that I'm in for MMA that I wonder what Jalen Turner's up to. I wonder if he's got a fight booked. That makes total sense. Book it. I got no problem matching styles with guys working their way up the rankings, and then bringing wrestler versus grappler further up. Maybe in like a top 10 or top 5 fight that sort of necessitates it. I got no problem with guys taking the easy way up the rankings. And
Yeah.
if that means putting Turner in a fun fight against Drew Dober, one thing we could definitely say coming off of this, though, is that every time Drew Dober and Bobby Green are on a card, you need to circle that fight. I don't care who the opponent is; it's going to be fireworks.
100%. Completely agree. Next fight on the card, Alex Caceres against Julian Erosa. I think on the staff picks, I think most people picked Erosa in this one, which I was quite surprised by. But Caceres got the job done. This guy's been out there in the UFC for quite some time. Julian Erosa, a guy from down the I-5 here, but not training in Portland anymore, I don't think. But fun fight again. Very quick, not too long. What were your thoughts on this one?
Surprise.
Yeah.
Um, Bruce Leroy's definitely capable of a finish, but it's usually through the grappling. In spite of his nickname, I don't think he's got a lot of like knockouts of that caliber. But as far as his body of work goes, that was a signature win for him to do what he did to Julian Erosa like that. And the kick was beautiful. He kind of threw a punch and then followed with the kick right away. And Erosa just wasn't ready. And he got caught.
Yeah.
And we knew Julian had chin issues coming in. So, the idea of fight ending in knockout does make sense. I thought that Julian could avoid that though, because Alex doesn't hit all that hard, but he got him with the kill shot and one of the definitely one of the finishes of the night for sure.
Definitely. Now, Caceres is a guy that's not going to move up, and he's not going to be a completely dominant guy in the division, but he's a guy that's always going to seem to be on the main card. Who do you see Caceres move up against next? Is it somebody like, is he going to be a gatekeeper for the division? Is he going to be a guy that just likes to put on fireworks for a fight card? I mean, he's a guy that we don't see on the preliminary cards anymore. We see him on the main card of these fights, obviously on the non-numbered cards. But who do you see Caceres against next? Like, who do you think he matches up well with?
Well, I think a big reason we're starting to see him more on main cards of these fight nights and pay-per-views is because he's just been around for so long.
Yeah,
He's a name people are going to recognize, and he's got a unique look, and he has a way of like kind of seizing the moment every time he's in there, especially in the last 3 years. I think I read something that if you've bet Alex Caceres at an underdog price, uh, every time he's been one each in the last 5 years, you'd be up 20, 30 units, something
wow.
crazy like that. He just gets it done. As
Yeah,
far as like who we can match him up against, um, I don't know. You're probably looking at bantamweight's so deep. I mean, you could really go with any name on this list that I'm looking at. But if you want to keep it like around like the top 20, you can do maybe I think Chris Gutierrez could be fun. That could
that's a
be a
fun
good
fight.
fun
Yeah, for sure.
style fight. You could also do Jack Shore in what would again perceive to be a get right fight for sure after losing to Ricky Simone.
Yep.
But Alex Caceres surprises, so that's
And
the
that's
element there.
actually the funny thing about that is a fight against Jack Shore. I mean, a victory for Caceres that actually puts him back up there in, could put him up into the echelon again, which at a guy who's been around as long as he has and with the back and forth, bouncing back and forth kind of thing, he's not a guy who you expect to be there. But if he gets a victory over Jack Shore, that's a name, it's whatnot, and that could be an interesting one. I actually like that.
Me too.
All right, the next fight on the card, Amir Albazi. This was a fun fight. This was, again, I think it was Alessandro Costa's UFC debut. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it was. And Albazi, this guy, holy crap, does he have hands? His punches were precision. It was just a fun fight. What were your thoughts on this one?
Oh, this is actually the one that I missed. We're
Okay, fair
reviewing
enough.
over
So
at
I
the
want to ask
UFC
though. Okay, so
Association.
this is 125 pounds, right? These two guys.
Yep.
How many years ago was it said that the 125-pound division was all but done? Now we're seeing fights like this, and my goodness, like 125 pounds might be the most exciting division on the roster.
I wish it was deeper, but as far as skill for skill goes, you can't miss with a 125-pound fight.
Not at all. All right, co-main event. Since you didn't watch that one, we'll talk Arman Sarukian. This guy, holy crap. Dominating victory, unanimous decision, 30-27. What do we do with this guy?
Well, I think he beats Dustin Poirier today.
Oh, wow.
So, but I said that also after the Gamrot fight. He really impressed me there too. He
Yeah.
really showed me his mettle, and a narrative that people were going with in this fight that were picking Demir was um, Armand got grappled by Gamrot, who couldn't out grapple Benil. But every fight's different, and there's different styles of grappling
And
too. It's not
Benil's
all
Benil, man. Like, that's a different
yeah.
story.
Oh yeah. I mean, that guy's kind of seen it all, and his grappling is it's up there with some of the best, and that's
Oh,
why
yeah.
people were picking him over Islam when they had that matchup booked.
Yeah.
But I love Arman Saryukin. He throws with such power, but he's kind of crisp in that way. A bit similar to like an Ilya Topuria. I kind of like link them together as far as like what the future top level MMA fighter can look like. I'm a big fan of his. I think he's a championship level fighter. Wouldn't shock me at all to see him um, rematch Islam for the title. I think that fight could be pretty big. But it's now time to force him into the conversation of having to fight a Justin Gaethje or Dustin. I know a lot of these guys are very protective of their spot when they get into that top five, but Arman's earned it. He's taking on killer after killer. People were picking Yoel Alvarez to beat him too, and I didn't
Yeah.
really see that either. Um, but the fight he had with Gamrot, which he arguably won, and this taking on Demir when he didn't have to. Typically you give a guy like Demir the veteran when he's starting
Yes.
to break into the rankings like this. You don't match up prospect for prospect, but it was a fun fight, and Arman just put a pace on him.
He did. And so we'll quote you on that. Good thing this is live and it's recorded and it's on video and we'll get to see, you believe he beats Dustin. Who knows how long it'll be till Dustin gets back in there. That staph infection on his foot is pretty nasty.
Right?
So we might need to match him up with someone else. But let's move to the main event. Interesting matchup. I'll throw a quote here from Sean Strickland. This guy was not too happy. Oh, shoot, I lost. Yeah, there we go. He was not too happy. He is telling everybody that he's a sore loser. Hats off to Jared. But again, you have judges that don't know how the fuck to do their job. If you look at the scorecards, you look at the significant strikes, and you look at how many times I wobbled him, and you have people, experts in the field, come up to me and say, yeah, man, I don't know how you lost that one. You landed more. The scorecard should say it. So anyway, I'm going to shut the fuck up now and get off my soapbox. Thank you guys for supporting me. Thank you to the UFC. Back to the drawing board, on to the next one. Now, yeah, sore loser. Lost the match in a split decision. How did you score this one, Jack?
I had it for Strickland.
Yeah.
I did, but it was
He
close.
outboxed him. He wobbled him. He caused more damage. You look at judging criteria. That's what it's got to go by. Damage does, it's crazy.
Yeah, I thought he did more damage as well. But not only that, but Jared seemed to be more physically bothered by the shots
Yeah.
Sean was landing. And I think that in a close striking fight like it was, that's gotta edge it. But
I completely agree. Now, how many weeks in a row are we gonna say, the judges messed up?
I don't know. But this was nothing compared to
No,
what we
no, no,
saw.
no, definitely
Um,
not. It
yeah,
wasn't a robbery, and I think robbery gets thrown around way too much in
yep.
this sport, especially by a lot of people on Twitter. And I mean, high-level MMA journalists and media members throw around the word robbery far too much as well. I don't agree with the word robbery. I mean, a lot of times these matches are close and it could be anyone's battle. And unless you've gone and done a judging, course like the Big John course or any of these guys that do judging criteria courses and you're in the MMA media field, you shouldn't be calling fights robberies, or you should be watching them more than once in order to, make your final decision. I think that could be a cool. I used to do an MMA media POV on MMA Sucka, and it was I went and I message all the people from the MMA media scene and I'd ask them what their scores were on these close fights. And it was sort of a cool, we got to break down and see where all these different media members scored the fight. I didn't even ask for their opinion and whatnot. I just wanted the scorecards to see where it was, sort of like the MMA decisions, but actually interact with these guys. And it's sort of an interesting thing because everybody looks at fights differently, and I think that the way we're judging fights is differently than the way a lot of people are judging fights. um yeah, I don't know. I That Patty Pimblett Jared Gordon one was really bad. um but like I talked with Juan Archuleta, and he scored that Danny Sabatello fight for Danny Sabatello. So like the way things look in people's eyes are completely different from everyone else.
You have obviously scoring criteria for these fights, but the criteria can come off as being open ended at times where, you know,
100%.
damage. What is damage? Damage is very vague. Damage
It
can come in so
Yes,
many different shapes and sizes.
and octagon control and all that kind of stuff. Which octagon control is the last one on the list.
Yep.
But if a guy is pushing a guy up against the cage and he's held him there for 5 minutes, moving around, even well, obviously not 5 minutes because likely they're not going to stall and stay there for 5 minutes. But it seemed like that's what Rafion Stotts was doing against against Danny Sabatello. So he was up against the cage, holding him there. And these guys are landing elbows and they're landing strikes while they're getting held up against the cage. So who do you score that for? The guy landing the strikes or the guy holding and controlling there? It should be the guy landing the strikes, right?
Should be, especially if they're bothering
Yes.
visibly
Yeah.
the guy taking the strikes. Um,
Or when
I
it
can
comes to the
agree with that.
ground and a guy is in a closed guard or he's in an open guard even, and the guy on the bottom is landing strikes and the guy on the top is covering up, again, should be the case for the guy landing the strikes.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely favor strikes past the open guard, than strikes in open guard. Um,
100%.
but that's just me. That's something that I've kind of taken to myself over the years of watching. But that's the other tough thing too. There's the criteria, there's what you think, and then there's what you think the judges are going to think.
Yes.
So that it's so multi-layered. One solution that I've like kind of favored when it comes to fixing judging is to just add two more judges. If you have more judges, if you have a Douglas Crosby in a five-judge room, his opinion on the fight is going to carry less weight than it would with three judges.
What are your thoughts on
I
open scoring?
hate it.
Do you?
I think that could kill the sport. I
Why
think
is
it's that
that?
bad. Um, I don't know. Just the idea of calling out scores in between rounds can fundamentally change the way a fight goes, and I think the spirit of the fight. John Don. I was just watching one of John Donaher's appearances on Rogan,
Yeah.
coming off the Gordon Ryan stuff, and he was saying how the essence of jujitsu, what makes it so great with the new formats that are being experimented with, is that it incentivizes a finish.
Yep.
When a fighter gives up or submits, taps out, fight is over. It's the most clear cut way to decide what happens. So if you have a fighter up 2 rounds and he knows it, and he's gonna coast, over the final 5 minutes, it's just not. It's just not
Yeah.
fun for the viewer.
I do agree with that. It puts the incentive in the guy that's losing if it is, 1 round apiece kind of, or 2 rounds to none. The guy has to hunt for a victory. If his corner is just telling him, you know, you're up, you're up, then it's a completely different story, right? Because corners can see something completely different than the judges. We did have an open criteria or open scoring on a couple of our local Battlefield Fight League cards. It didn't last long. They did it for maybe two or three. It wasn't even for the whole card. It was only for the main card. And it was interesting because you got to hear the crowd reaction. They announced it loud and live, and the crowd got to react to it. Am I in favor of it? I don't know. I'm not as opposed to it as you seem to be.
Yeah, and I know they were. I believe they experimented with it in the Missouri State Athletic Commission as well last year. Um, I'm open to a discussion about it, but I don't think it saves the state of judging. I think there are more creative solutions that can be employed. I also think part of the skill of a corner is being able to motivate their fighter in a way of being able to, kind of see how the fight's going. Like I've seen some corners tell a fighter they're up when they're clearly not, or it's a
Yes.
clear 1-1. And I don't know why they do that. Like,
No, I
that's
think
on them.
it's trying to pump them up, but that doesn't pump any tires because that could ultimately ruin the fighter.
No, I mean, I can't really speak to this because I've never fought in a cage.
Yeah.
But I have, played sports before, and I would, if I didn't know what the score was, I would do much better knowing that I was down
Oh
than
yeah.
if I was up.
Yes.
But
You
that's
do
just
see in
me.
every other, I mean, not combat sports, but you see in every other sport, there's a scoreboard. So there is, that
That's
facet of
true.
it, right? So like hockey, football, soccer, everything, you see the score, it's visible. Even in jiu-jitsu, you see the score on the screen. Like if you're down points, if it's an IBJJF matchup, you see the points, so you know you have to go. But I think it's that the thing is we're talking about judging here, and we don't know how these judges are scoring the card. And what actually going back to that Juan Archuleta interview, I don't know if you had a chance to watch it, but he talked about the fact that he actually studies each individual judge. If he knows who's judging his fight, he's going to study the way they've judged fights before, so he knows how to fight that fight.
I think that's a very high level thing to do, and I think that fighters need to be employing that kind of tactic more. It's kind of like when I hear about guys that don't watch their fights and they don't watch film on their opponent. Like, what are you doing? That
Yeah,
is an invaluable resource that you can use to your advantage, and you just choose not to for reasons.
for sure. And he's fighting on the Bellator versus Ryzen card, right? So he didn't know he's going into new territory in Japan. He didn't know what even the rules were going to be. So he looked up the Ryzen rules. He looked up everything. And, I'm sure there's a lot of guys going in there that have no clue what they're getting into. And there's obviously a lot of guys that get into MMA that don't know all the rules. But us as media members also don't all know all the judging criteria as well. It doesn't come down to just those three factors. There's, I'm sure, a ton. If you go to a judge's course, it's a 2-day seminar. So obviously, the media members need to stop throwing that word robbery out there, in my opinion.
I agree with that, but I also would say that I think the most qualified people to judge an MMA fight, outside of fighters, former fighters, and coaches, would be media members. I know it would create a bit of a conflict of interest to have a media member also bring official scoring to a fight. Um, but I don't see why someone couldn't transition out of that if they wanted to become a judge and take that path. I just think we need some fresh blood in MMA judging. I've been hearing the same names for years:
Oh, yeah.
Adelaide Bird, Douglas Crosby, Sal D'Amato.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think some fresh blood would go a long way.
And I also think that a lot of these people, especially like I mean, look at what we saw last weekend in that matchup after the fight, and he said, he doesn't know if he wants to fight for the UFC anymore because of the judging. I think a lot of people need to understand as well that the UFC and these fight promotions aren't choosing their judges; it's the athletic commission. People need to know that and need to understand that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I do know that in places without a commission, the UFC can
Yes,
choose their judges, and I believe that's the case in Abu Dhabi, if I'm not mistaken.
could be the case. Yeah.
I think there, and maybe a couple other places as well. Also worth noting that what Ankalaev said in the cage after the fight. Kind of got lost a bit in translation. He just doesn't want to fight in Nevada anymore. He's
Okay.
still open to fighting in the UFC.
Hilarious. So, translators can be. Anyways, moving on. I digress. This Thursday night, you covered UFC Fight Pass Invitational 3. Was a fun fight card. Or grappling card. Some people hate when they call them fights. This was not a fight card. It was not combat jiu-jitsu, which actually goes down today. Eddie Bravo, combat jiu-jitsu today. UFC Fight Pass. Check that out. But the main event, Gordon Ryan versus Nicky Rodriguez. Fun fight. Not the way anyone expected it to go down. I think it was a better matchup than what Vinny would have been, in my opinion. Vinny, obviously the old school style, very different than what Nicky brings to the table. Similar size, but different techniques and whatnot. It's cool to see B Team against New Wave. I think we'll see that for years to come. Gordon Ryan pulled guard on the bottom right off the hop. Not surprised by that. Didn't want to waste any energy, obviously, with it a 20-minute match, not a no time limit match. He had to sort of dictate the pace and where he wanted to go. Nicky Rod didn't do anything. He stalled for the most part, didn't try to pass the guard or anything. Got one body lock pass. Gordon attempted to get to the feet. Nicky gets the toe hold, and holy crap, popped the foot. I got a question for you. Went to overtime. If anyone's watched it or anyone hasn't watched it, Gordon Ryan ended up winning on fastest escape time. In overtime, it's interesting because there's a 2-minute time limit. Gordon held him for 2 minutes in the first overtime round, I believe. Every other time he escaped. And in the final overtime round, Nicky Rod, as he likes to do, will just, that rear naked choke, anything under the eyebrows, he'll go for. And this wasn't under the chin. It was over the jaw. It was basically a crank.
Face crank.
Yeah, a face crank, which Nicky Rod will get tabs from. I mean, you'll break the jaw, you'll break the teeth, you'll do it all. The 2-minute time limit comes up. Referee doesn't stop the match because he was obviously like out to lunch. Nobody says anything, so Gordon taps. It was a tap to say, okay, fuck it, it's over, the match is done. My thinking, okay, I understand they can't change the rules as they go, but I think in a match where it comes down to overtime, much like soccer, it's completely different, but in my opinion, if a submission is locked on, it should just go. They should keep going. The time shouldn't matter. What are your thoughts on that?
Wow, I don't know, but I can tell you this. I can tell you this.
That was a
actually
long-winded
watching
way to get to that, but I just wanted to talk.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way. But I'll tell you this: when I was watching that main event, I actually had the sound muted.
Okay.
For some reason. But I saw the tap and I saw the time limit come up, and I was like, it took me out of it for a second.
Yeah.
And I know that like the tap is sort of inconsequential to
Yeah.
the ride time difference, overtime rules, but it felt like a pro wrestling moment, kind of where like wrestlers' shoulders are on the mat.
Oh yeah.
He's got a submission hold locked in, and then the guy on top taps out at the same time.
Yeah.
It felt like that, and that was exciting. It was an exciting matchup of two guys that know each other very well.
Oh yeah. I used to train together for years.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I think that Nicky Rod's stock certainly goes up in this.
For sure. He didn't lose anything from it at all.
Yeah, and I know Gordon, gave some post match comments. I didn't see those. I'm
Yeah,
sure
he said
couldn't be
He said
happy
Nicky
with
greased
him.
and whatnot, and
Oh
and how
man,
greasing makes it very difficult, and once sweat comes on and everything, if you're oiled up and you have sweat, then you just slip. But so again, on those lines, submission locked in. In most organizations, and even in IBJJF and grappling competitions, ADCC, everything, even in regulation, if a submission is locked in, a different line of scenario, not time, but if a submission is locked in and you roll out of bounds while the submission is locked in, you get an advantage point. The submission gets released, and you start back from the feet like you're starting the match all over again. I think anytime there's a submission locked in, it should just continue. I mean, it's tough to reset in the middle with a submission locked in, and the defense is going to be completely different because you have it locked. If you're not going to fall off a platform, or you're not going to go into anybody, I think if a submission is locked in, you don't reset them.
I think you'd be right in that. But I also think that the whole overtime system in this rule set is something that can be looked at. I don't know um, if ride time, escape time is should be the determinant factor in who wins a grappling contest. Now, I've only
Anyway,
been following
this
the sport for about a year now,
yeah, this is all
but
EBI rules. So when Eddie Bravo created the EBI, Eddie Bravo Invitational, this was the rule set. And prior to this rule set, it just came down to a judge's decision or referee decision, which in the end, that would suck as well because in this match, absolutely nothing happened. And it actually might have gone to Nicky Rod because he popped Gordon's foot because he had the submission attempt. Gordon was trying to get the heel. He transitioned from the Achilles to the heel and wasn't able to do it. I saw Lachlan Giles on Instagram posted literally the night after that. He posted his instructional on toe hold defense and said someone could really use
oh
this. It
man,
was pretty funny because Gordon's been sort of poking at Lachlan for a few weeks here. So that was pretty funny. And I was surprised with that toe hold, to be honest with you, because to get a toe hold and to lock it in, you need the knee bent at a 90-degree angle to get a tap. And Gordon's leg was straight. But Nicky has such power that, man, Gordon actually said in the post fight that he broke his leg. He didn't even break his toe or his foot. I mean,
broke his leg.
a toe hold is the ankle. It affects the whole leg, but he said he broke his leg. So I was surprised that he was able to even move on from that. I don't know
Yeah,
what happens post match. I don't know where Gordon goes from this. I don't know who he's going to compete against next. It's obviously not going to be on UFC Fight Pass as his next fight, I don't think. He'll probably compete for probably who's number one. In my opinion, that will be his next match. Who it's against, who knows? But we're going to see Nicky Rod against Gordon Ryan again for sure.
yeah, I think we're gonna see it again multiple times. And I agree with you. I think it was a more worthy main event than what Gordon versus Vinny would have been. I know that had more of a storyline to it, but
And he
Gordon
still
versus
wants
Nicky's
it.
got a storyline too. You know,
Yeah, it
with
did.
as former teammates, and what does strike me as funny though is I know Gordon kind of broke off from Danaher Death Squad and started his own team. But one reason why he says that he won't go to MMA is because he wants someone to step up and take his place.
Yeah.
But the irony in that is he's so defensive of his spot that he'll do anything to keep it.
Yes.
Um, and he really wants to be more of like the Michael Jordan of grappling as the sport continues to grow and find its footing in the landscape of modern mixed
He doesn't
martial
want
arts.
anybody to take his place.
Yeah, yeah, that's the irony of it. Like,
Yeah.
I would love to see what he can do in mixed martial arts. He's a big, strong guy. Also very technical. I love seeing these big technical guys get in there, which is why I've taken such an appreciation for Daniel Monasu
Yeah.
over this last year. He for as big as he is, Danaher sort of beats into him that you got to fight small, you gotta grapple small and think with a small man's mentality, and I think it's invaluable.
It is, and he had a fun match as well. I mean, very quick, but
Yeah,
the guy moves like a lightweight, and he's a big dude.
yeah,
That match was fun. I was surprised actually by Misha Tate. To be honest with you, I was surprised she lasted till overtime against Bia Mosquita because Bia's a beast. That was fun, and the absolute tournament. Holy crap, Mason Fowler, amazing fight.
I
Amazing
didn't.
competition, and to be honest with you, Luke Griffith's stock rose immensely in this one. I believe he's a blue or purple belt. So, holy crap, he proved that he's someone to watch as well. He's from New Wave too, so
Yeah, I mean, it's the storylines that could develop in these grappling tournaments are akin to anything that you'll see in MMA or even like pro wrestling. And that's why I've taken such a liking to it over this last year. Here you have Nicky Rod, who's in the tournament, probably going to be favored to win, coming off his win at the EBI at the most recent EBI.
Yeah.
Um, Luke Griffiths, the replacement, comes in and just kind of dominates on his way to the final. And who does he see in the final? But the former Submission Underground champion,
Yeah.
Mason Fowler, who in my head, I was kind of thinking, you know what, this could be a good spot for him with Nicky Rod out, and it was. You know, he did what he does, and yeah, that was a big win for him.
It was. And Mason is a guy who, we in Submission Underground, he was a guy who ended up fighting to these overtime rounds with most of his opponents, to be honest with you, other than even he competed against Craig Jones back then in Submission Underground two or three times, I believe. One was very controversial, but he's a guy who pushes the pace, and it doesn't look like he's stalling when it is like the way Nicky Rod did in his match. He's still hunting, but overtime is his bread and butter, and if it gets there, he's gonna do whatever it takes to win.
Yeah, if you're a basketball player, you got to drill your free throws. If you're a soccer player, you got to drill your penalty kicks. And if you're a grappler, you got to know what to expect come overtime and be ready for anything. And
100%.
that was the storyline.
Yes, and as I said, combat jiu-jitsu. So if you want to watch grappling, goes down today, UFC Fight Pass. We had some other fight cards this weekend.
Oh, Jared, real quick. Speaking of grappling, I
Yes.
covered the CFFC show on Friday night, and they announced some of the upcoming matchups for their next Fury Pro grappling event.
Oh, amazing.
Um, and some of those will include, I wrote them down actually, Clay Guida versus Chase Hooper,
Interesting.
OSP versus Andre Petrosky at 220 pounds, Joe Pfeiffer versus Eric Anders, Mike Malott versus Trevin Giles, and Pat Sabatini versus Bruce Leroy.
Mike Malott. Haven't heard that name in a while. I actually saw him commentating. I believe he was commentating the Unified card, or
Yeah, with Bronstetter.
yeah. Um, Interesting, because you don't see, most of these grappling promotions are doing BJJ guys against MMA guys. This is like straight MMA versus MMA. So it'll be interesting to see how these ones play out. If they'll be wrestling heavy, if they'll be sort of stalling like we've seen MMA guys do before, like the Brendan Schaub. I don't know if you've seen that Brendan Schaub
Yeah.
Metamoris. If we
Yeah,
see something
who was
like
that
that,
against?
what's that?
Who was that against?
Oh, who was it against? Name slips my mind, but
Oh, it was a big name.
it was a
I
big
remember
name.
that. It was so bad.
He basically just pushed on his head the entire time and
And then he
backed away.
defended it after the fact. I remember
Yes,
that too.
yeah, that was the worst. And I actually miss Metamoris. Those were fun events. Obviously, guys didn't end up getting paid, but they were fun events. And Ariel Helwani still has the Metamoris black belt on his table when he does his show.
Yeah, that's true. It was Cyborg Abreu.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously you don't want to go to the ground with Cyborg and you don't want to get into his guard or anything like that, but if you're going to sign up to compete, don't just stand there and it was basically like a dog playing catch with with his owner. There was nothing going on. As I
Right.
said, you covered Brave CF. You said you covered CFFC this past week. Talk about what people missed and what they can check out on the website and some fun matchups that you got to witness.
Yeah, so I covered a pair of different Brave Combat Federation events this week, as well as CFFC. Now that's a promotion that I've wanted to cover for the site for a while, and the timing just hasn't quite worked out. I'm from Philadelphia originally, um, so if I'm ever back home, I'd love to get out to a CFFC event. To me, it's interesting to see how the regional promotions sort of assert themselves over the course of a year. And CFFC is one to me that is becoming more on par with the likes of the more traditional feeder organizations such as LFA. They had a really well paced show, and the commentary was excellent. It was John Morgan and CM Punk. CM Punk's a great color commentator. Um, I know he's sort of a pariah in the pro wrestling world right
Yeah.
now. But that being said, he's got a real future for this. I could see the UFC hiring him in that kind of role one day. I mean, he's no more qualified than Joe Rogan, that's for sure.
True.
And he's probably not going to go into the cage after a fight and get a guy that just went to a draw to admit that he lost.
Yeah.
So that's a positive. But there were some crazy finishes on this card. Um, Billy Ray Valdez, this heavyweight making his pro debut, is getting dominated by Ian Alston from Philly and takes the nut shot of a lifetime. It was straight right down the pipe, shin to cup. He should have taken the full time. He takes 2 minutes. He comes back. Alston rushes in, gets knocked out.
Oh man.
This all within a 2 minute 45 second span of fight time. That's
Wow.
heavyweight. Heavyweight in the regional scene's a lot of fun.
Was
Tyler
that on
Matheson
Fight
got a
Pass?
huge win. Yes. Yeah. Tyler Matheson got a huge win over Eddie Torres in the main event. And then going back to Brave, you had a couple different storylines. Joeltan Luderbach, the PFL veteran that went to split decisions with Roush Manfio and Clay Collard in the last PFL season. He was going for the super lightweight title this weekend. He ended up missing weight by, I believe they said 200 grams, which is about
Wow.
a quarter of a pound. So he will not get the interim super lightweight title, but he will likely have to face the current super lightweight champion. That's Eldar Eldarov at some point. Eldarov fought on Monday. He was fighting a weight class up in a special fight, and I guess they just want to make an interim champion. That's not going to matter now. I guess they're just going to match them up anyway.
Fair enough. We're about 50 minutes in. Not much else to talk about. We talked grappling. We talked UFC Vegas 66. We talked all the stuff you covered this past week. I have nothing else to say. As I said a few minutes ago, Combat Jiu Jitsu goes down this afternoon, UFC Fight Pass. It's a very slow week for MMA. We've got ACA 150 on Friday, and I believe that's about it. Jack, what you got going on this week? Anything cool?
Yeah, I'm just gonna be working this week up until Christmas. I'll probably have some year-end type of content going up on the site. I'm not sure what. I'm gonna coordinate that with some of the other writers and see what they've got going, and we'll put our heads together and do something fun. I know you alluded to a year-end stream of sorts. That could be a
Yeah,
lot of
so
fun.
next week we'll take the day off on Sunday. Obviously, it's Christmas, but we'll do a midweek show or Monday, Tuesday kind of show where I don't know whether we'll have more than just you and I on the show. But I alluded to the MMA Sucker podcast guys, Tim Wheaton and Fraser Crone, that come the new year, the first week of January, maybe we'll do an MMA roundtable where we'll collab with the two shows and just talk about the year that was, the year that is, and everything in between, what we can expect in 2023. But that does it for another edition of MMA Church. He is Jack Wood, Good Willie. Blah, blah, blah. I'm Jeremy Brand. Check us out tomorrow or midweek. We got the MMA Sucker podcast, so make sure you check that out as well. We will be off next Sunday as it's Christmas. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to all of you folks, and we'll see you soon.
See ya.